The execution order arrived at dawn, sealed in black wax, and Lurel read it twice before her hands began to shake. 3 days. That was the number stamped beneath the Viceroy's crest. 72 hours until the alien queen chained in the Undercroft would be put to death for the crime of refusing to kneel. Lurel folded the parchment into her apron pocket, steadied her breathing, and descended the stone stairs with the morning tray as though nothing had changed. As though she hadn't just read the death warrant of the only person in this fortress who had ever spoken her name. The cell smelled of damp stone and iron. Queen Sethara sat cross-legged on the floor, her wrists bound by energy shackles that hummed a low, ugly frequency. Her skin was the color of deep storm sea, a blue-gray that shifted toward violet in the thin light falling through the grate above. Her ears were long and tapered, swept back like the wings of a hunting bird. Her eyes vast, dark, pupilless pools that reflected everything and gave nothing away tracked Lurel as she knelt to slide the tray through the feeding slot. "You read something this morning," Sethara said. Her voice was low and unhurried, as though she were sitting in a throne room rather than a cage. "Your pulse is elevated. Your hands moved differently when you set down the bowl." Lurel said nothing. She was a handmaiden, the lowest rank of palace staff, assigned to feed and tend the prisoner because no one of consequence wanted the duty. She had been told on her first day, "Do not speak to the captive. Do not answer her questions. Do not look into her eyes for longer than 3 seconds because the Nethari Queen caste could read emotion through sustained eye contact, and she would use it." Lurel had broken every one of those rules within the first week. 3 days, Lurel whispered and hated herself for it. Sethara's expression did not change. Those dark, fathomless eyes held Lurel's gaze 4 seconds, 5, 6, and what moved across the queen's face was not fear. It was recognition. The same look she had given Lurel on the very first morning, when Lurel had knelt to slide the tray through and accidentally called her Your Grace instead of Prisoner 12. "I know," Sethara said quietly. "I heard them drafting it through the ventilation shaft last night. The Viceroy wants a public display. He will invite the sector governors." "Then why are you calm?" Sethara's mouth curved, not quite a smile, not quite grief. "Because you are here, Lurel, and you brought the bread with the seeds I like." Lurel's throat closed. She pressed her forehead against the cold bars, just for a moment, and then pulled back and climbed the stairs before the guards changed shift. The fortress was called Kethrin Hold, and it sat on a wind-scoured plateau above a dead ocean on a world the Nethari had once owned. The Viceroy, a broad-shouldered Sakari warlord named Draven, had taken it during the territorial wars and converted the queen's own palace into her prison. There was a particular cruelty in that Sethara's ancestors had built these walls, carved these corridors, planted the ghost-pale trees in the courtyard that still bloomed despite the occupation. The Viceroy kept her alive for 2 years as a symbol, a conquered queen in her own house. Now even that use had expired. The sector governors were growing restless with the cost of maintaining an occupied world. Draven needed a spectacle proof that the Nethari spirit was truly broken. A queen dying in chains in the courtyard of her own palace would deliver the message. Lurel moved through the upper corridors carrying fresh linens, invisible the way handmaidens were trained to be. She passed the guards' mess, where Draven's soldiers ate and laughed and sharpened their ceremonial blades for the execution. She passed the communications room, where the Viceroy's adjutant was sending invitations to the sector governors. She passed the armory and the war room and the locked door behind which Draven kept the neural disruption array that powered the queen's shackles. And she passed the maintenance bay, where the human worked. His name was Cole Maddox. He was the only human in the fortress, the only human most of the Sakari had ever seen. He had arrived 8 months ago as part of a prisoner transfer from a border skirmish. A captured combat engineer, mid-30s, with the kind of face that looked like it had been built to take punishment and keep working. Dark hair cropped close, jaw that carried a scar from the left ear to the chin, hands that were always doing something, rewiring a conduit, rebalancing a pressure valve, stripping a corroded panel, and rebuilding it from components he machined himself. The Sakari kept him alive because he was useful. Kethrin Hold was old, its systems failing, and none of Draven's engineers could keep the water recyclers and atmospheric processors running. Cole could. He worked in silence, ate what they gave him, slept in the maintenance crawlspace behind the boiler array, and never once complained. The guards had stopped watching him after the 3rd month. He was furniture, background, a tool that fixed things. Lurel knew better. She had seen what happened 4 months ago, when a guard had dragged Sethara from her cell to the courtyard for one of Draven's display sessions, forcing the queen to stand in the sun while the garrison watched, a demonstration of power over a caged monarch. Sethara had stood without expression, her back straight, her eyes fixed on the horizon, but the guard had shoved her to her knees, and the energy shackles had sparked against the stone, and Sethara's hands had bled where the metal bit into her wrists. Cole had been repairing a water main in the courtyard. He had stopped working, stood up, and walked to where the guard was standing over the kneeling queen. He did not speak. He did not ask permission. He simply placed his body between the guard and the queen, pulled the maintenance cloth from his belt, and knelt in front of Sethara to wrap her bleeding hands. His movements were slow and deliberate, not gentle in the tender sense, but careful in the precise sense. The way someone handles something they believe matters. The guard had beaten him for it. 2 cracked ribs, a split eyebrow, a week in the isolation cell. Cole had taken it without a sound, and when they let him out, he went back to fixing the water main. The same water main. The same courtyard. He picked up his wrench exactly where he had set it down and resumed the repair as though 7 days in a dark cell had been a brief lunch break. From that day forward, every time Lurel descended to Sethara's cell, the queen asked the same question first. How is the human? Not the engineer, not the prisoner, the human, as though the word itself carried a weight the Nethari language did not have a container for. Lurel paused outside the maintenance bay now, pretending to adjust her linen stack. Through the half-open door she could see Cole bent over a schematic, his scarred hands tracing a circuit path. He looked up, and their eyes met for a fraction of a second. She saw the question in his face, the same one he asked every morning with his eyes alone, because they had both learned not to speak where the corridor microphones could catch them. She held up 3 fingers against the linen stack, barely visible. A gesture that could have been anything, adjusting her grip, counting linens, scratching an itch. Cole's jaw tightened. He looked back down at his schematic, but his hands had stopped moving. 3 days. The countdown had begun. That night, Lurel did something she had never done before. She went to the maintenance bay after lights out, moving through the darkened corridors with the practiced silence of someone who had spent her entire life being invisible. Cole was awake, sitting on an overturned crate, staring at a disassembled power coupling as though it held the answers to a question no one had thought to ask. "You know," Lurel said from the doorway. "I heard the adjutant sending the invitations," Cole said. His voice was low and rough, the kind of voice that sounded like it had been used for giving orders in places where orders meant life or death. 3 days, public execution. The sector governors attend. Draven gets his theater. "She won't beg," Lurel said. "You know that. She will stand there and look at him, and she will not give him a single word, and he will kill her anyway and call it victory." Cole was quiet for a long time. The boiler array ticked behind the wall. Somewhere above them, a guard's boots passed on the stone, and both of them held perfectly still until the footsteps faded. Then Cole said, "Have you ever seen a Nethari queen die?" "No." "I have, on Viros 3 during the annexation. The Sakari executed Queen Metherin in the central plaza. She did not beg. She did not speak. But when they activated the neural lance, every Nethari within 100 kilometers felt it. He paused. The Queen caste are connected to their people through a resonance bond. It is not telepathy, not exactly. More like a shared frequency. A carrier wave that links every Nethari who belongs to that Queen's line. When a Queen dies in pain, the frequency shatters. Every Nethari who shares it suffers a psychic rupture. Some go blind. Some lose years of memory. Children are the most vulnerable. Lurel's blood went cold. Sethara's people, the Nethari settlements in the outer districts. 7,000 civilians, including a school compound with 400 children under the age of development. Their resonance bonds haven't fully formed yet. A shatter event would not just hurt them, it would cripple their capacity to form bonds for the rest of their lives. 400 children who would never feel the frequency of their own people again. The maintenance bay was very quiet. A pipe dripped somewhere behind the wall, counting seconds. "We cannot let this happen," Lurel said, and heard her own voice as though it belonged to someone else, someone braver, someone who had not spent 23 years learning how to be invisible. Cole looked at her. His eyes were steady, gray-green, the color of deep water over stone. There was no pity in them, no patronizing reassurance. He looked at her the way he looked at a broken system that needed fixing, with complete, focused, unsentimental attention. "No," he said. "We cannot." He reached behind the crate and pulled out a rolled schematic. When he spread it on the workbench, Lurel saw that it was not a repair diagram. It was a map of Kethrin Hold, every corridor, every access shaft, every maintenance tunnel, every security node, every guard rotation annotated in Cole's small, precise handwriting. "I have been mapping this fortress for 4 months," he said, "since the day in the courtyard." Lurel stared at the map. "Since you wrapped her hands. Since I saw a woman bleeding in her own palace and a garrison of soldiers who looked at her and saw furniture." He tapped the map at a point on sub-level 3. "The shackles are powered by the neural disruption array here. Cut the power, the shackles open. But the array is behind a sealed door, with a biometric lock keyed to Draven's senior staff." "I know the door," Lurel said. "I pass it every day. I clean the corridor outside it." "The lock requires a retinal scan from a staff rank officer. Can you get one?" Lurel thought of Commander Thesic, who drank too much fermented kava after evening mess and fell asleep at his desk with his face propped on his hand, his eyes half open in that loose, unconscious way that the Sakari had when they slept, a physiological trait. She had learned, not a habit. She had cleaned his office every night for 8 months. She knew his schedule to the minute. She knew which nights he drank the most. She knew the angle of his head when he slept. "Yes," she said. "I can." Cole studied her face for a moment. Lurel expected him to question her, to ask if she was sure, to offer her a way out. He did none of those things. He simply nodded and moved on to the next element of the plan. When the array loses power, the fortress's internal sensor grid goes dark for approximately 90 seconds before the backup generator kicks in. 90 seconds to get from the array room to the cell, open the door manually, and reach the service tunnel that runs beneath the courtyard to the exterior wall. 90 seconds is not enough. It is if the backup generator does not kick in on schedule. Lurel looked at him. "You can delay it." "I have been servicing that generator for 8 months. I know every relay, every circuit, every failpoint. Every time I filed a repair order, I learned something new about its tolerances. I can introduce a cascade delay in the failover sequence that buys us 4 minutes instead of 90 seconds. Maybe 5, if the secondary bus takes the expected time to reroute. And if it does not." Cole's mouth twitched, not a smile, something harder. "Then we will need to be very fast." "There is something else," Lurel said. "Even if we free her, even if we reach the tunnel and get outside, where do we go? The plateau is 60 kilometers from the nearest settlement, and Draven has patrol craft." "The maintenance skiff on the lower dock," Cole said. I filed a requisition to service it 3 weeks ago. I fueled it, ran the pre-flight checks, and replaced the worn thrust coupling. It is flight ready. You filed a maintenance requisition to prepare an escape vehicle. I filed a maintenance requisition to perform atmospheric testing on a secondary utility craft that no one has used in 9 months. The forms are in the system. The fuel logs are accurate. No one reads maintenance requisitions, Lurel. No one reads anything filed by a man they think is furniture. Lurel sat with that for a moment. The precision of it, the patience. 4 months of mapping, 3 weeks of staged logistics, 8 months of learning every system in the fortress, all while being invisible, all while being a tool that fixed things. You are not furniture, she said. Neither are you, Cole said. Neither is she. Day 1 of the countdown began with rain. Lurel carried the morning tray down to Sethara's cell, moving through the routine with the mechanical precision that made her invisible. The guards at the stairwell barely glanced at her. The handmaiden, the food tray, the empty return, the cycle that had repeated every morning for 8 months without variance. This morning, as she knelt to slide the tray through the slot, she pressed her thumb against the underside of the bread, a Nethari gesture Sethara had taught her in whispered lessons during the long months. It meant, listen carefully, I have something to tell you. Sethara's dark eyes locked onto the gesture. She reached for the bread, and their fingers brushed through the slot. 3 seconds of contact. Long enough for Lurel to feel the faint vibration of the Queen's resonance frequency, the hum that lived beneath Sethara's skin like a second heartbeat. We are going to open your cage, Lurel mouthed, barely a breath. Sethara's expression did not change, but her fingers tightened on the bread once and then released. A Nethari acknowledgement. I hear you, I trust you. Lurel climbed the stairs with her heart hammering so hard, she was certain the wall-mounted audio sensors would flag the anomaly. But the sensors were calibrated for speech patterns and footfalls, not heartbeats. Cole had told her that. He had told her exactly what the sensors could and could not detect, because he had serviced every one of them. She spent the morning on her regular duties, cleaning the officers' quarters, laundering the viceroy's formal robes, polishing the ceremonial blades that would be used at the execution. The blades were ancient Nethari weapons, taken from the palace armory, another calculated cruelty. Sethara would be killed with her own ancestors' steel. Lurel polished them until they gleamed, and memorized the guard's rotation schedule while she worked. 2 at the Undercroft stairwell, rotating every 4 hours. 1 at the neural disruption array door, replaced at shift change. 3 in the corridor between the cells and the service tunnels. At the 16th hour on execution day, all interior guards would be pulled to the courtyard for the ceremony. That gap was their window. At the noon bell, Lurel brought water to the maintenance bay as part of her rounds. Cole was installing a new pressure coupling in the atmospheric processor, legitimate work that had been on the repair queue for weeks. When she set the cup on his workbench, she placed it on top of a folded cloth. Inside the cloth was a slip of paper with the guard rotation time she had memorized. Cole glanced at it while drinking the water, then set the cup down on the paper, soaking it. The ink dissolved. The information was in his head. The evidence was a wet stain on a workbench. That afternoon, a complication. Draven's quartermaster ordered a full inventory of the maintenance stores. Every tool, every component, every piece of salvage in Cole's bay had to be cataloged and verified. The quartermaster stood in the doorway with a data tablet while Cole opened every drawer, every cabinet, every storage bin. Lurel, cleaning the corridor outside, held her breath. The portable retinal scanner Cole had been assembling was hidden in a false panel behind the compressor unit. If the quartermaster looked there. Cole opened the compressor panel without hesitation. Behind it, a neatly organized set of pressure gauges, calibration tools, and replacement gaskets. The false panel was somewhere behind those, but the quartermaster's attention was on the front layer. Cole pointed to each item, named its function, and the quartermaster checked boxes on his tablet. "You keep a tidy shop," the quartermaster said, surprised. "Systems fail when parts cannot be found," Cole said. The quartermaster left. Laurel resumed cleaning. She did not look at Cole as she passed the doorway, but she saw his hands, steady on the workbench, and she understood what she had just witnessed. A man who had hidden an escape plan inside the immaculate organization of his own competence. The best hiding place was the one no one thought to search, because everything visible was exactly as it should be. That evening, Laurel positioned herself for the retinal scan. She cleaned Commander Thesic's office an hour early, citing a schedule adjustment that no one verified. She placed a fresh bottle of fermented kava on his desk, the strong batch, from the crate she had noticed in the kitchens that morning, a gift for the commander's long hours. The adjutant waved her through without looking up. By the 20th hour, Thesic was slumped at his desk, the kava bottle nearly empty. His eyes were half-lidded in the loose Sakari sleep state, his breathing slow and rhythmic. Laurel cleaned around him with practiced calm, her cloth moving over surfaces, her body positioned between Thesic and the open door. When she was certain the corridor was empty and the audio sensors were cycling through their normal pattern buffer, she lifted the portable retinal scanner from her apron. It was the size of her palm, assembled from a medical diagnostic sensor, a salvaged focusing lens, and a data chip Cole had pulled from a decommissioned security panel. Crude, but functional. She held it 6 inches from Thesic's half-open left eye. The scan took 4 seconds. The device beeped once softly, barely audible, and the confirmation light pulsed green. Laurel tucked it back into her apron and polished the edge of the desk. Thesic did not stir. His kava-heavy breathing continued without interruption. She delivered the scanner to Cole's bay during her final cleaning round of the night, slipping it through the half-open door without breaking stride. She did not see him take it. She did not need to. 1 day down, 2 remaining. The second day brought a harder complication. Draven ordered a full inspection of the Undercroft. The Viceroy wanted the execution chamber prepared the courtyard above Sethara's cell, where the Queen would be brought up in chains and displayed before the governors. Maintenance crews swarmed the lower levels. Guards tripled their patrols, and Cole was pulled from his regular duties to repair a failing lighting array in the very corridor that connected the neural disruption array room to the prisoner cells. This was the corridor they needed to traverse during the escape, and now it was full of guards and maintenance workers and security officers, all examining the infrastructure that Cole had been quietly studying for months. Laurel watched from the upper gallery as Cole worked beneath the corridor lights, surrounded by guards who leaned against the walls and talked about the execution feast, what dishes the kitchens were preparing, how many governors had confirmed attendance, whether the Viceroy would use the neural lance or the traditional blade. Cole moved among them with the unhurried competence of a man doing his job, hands steady, expression neutral, the combat engineer performing routine maintenance. But Laurel could see what the guards could not. Each time Cole opened a junction box, he made a small adjustment that had nothing to do with the lighting array. A wire rerouted by 3 millimeters, a relay contact loosened by a quarter turn, a timing circuit's resistor value altered by a fraction that would cascade through the system when the backup generator tried to engage. He was sabotaging the failover sequence, one component at a time, in plain sight, while the men who would kill a queen in 48 hours stood beside him and discussed the menu. At the noon bell, one of the maintenance workers, a Sakari technician named Vord, noticed something. He frowned at a junction box Cole had just closed and opened it again. "This relay is loose," Vord said. Laurel's hands went still on the gallery railing. Cole glanced over. "Which one?" "The secondary failover. The contact looks worn." It is, Cole said. He walked over and examined the relay with the technician. I filed a replacement order 6 weeks ago, still pending. The supply chain from the outer systems is slow. He pulled out a small tool and tightened the contact, the same contact he had loosened 5 minutes earlier. That will hold until the replacement arrives. I will flag it in my evening report. Vord nodded, satisfied, and moved on. Cole closed the junction box and moved to the next one. His hands were steady. His face showed nothing. But Lurel saw the micro-adjustment he made to the next relay, a different one, deeper in the sequence, harder to spot. The sabotage continued, rerouted around the one component that had drawn attention. At the 14th hour, the inspection shifted focus. One of the security officers demanded a full diagnostic of the neural disruption array itself, the machine that powered Sethara's shackles and the fortress's internal sensor grid. Cole was ordered to run the diagnostic. Lurel stood in the corridor, pretending to polish a wall-mounted light fixture, while Cole entered the array room with 2 security officers. She could hear his voice through the open door, calm and technical, walking them through the system's status readings. Power output, nominal. Shackle frequency, stable. Sensor grid, operational. Backup generator failover, within acceptable parameters. Every reading he reported was accurate. Every system he tested was functioning correctly. The sabotage was not in the array or the generator, it was in the relays between them, in the cascade of tiny timing delays that would slow the failover by minutes instead of seconds. The diagnostic would not catch it because the diagnostic tested each system independently. The delays only materialized when the systems talked to each other during an actual power loss. Everything is clean, the security officer said. I recommend a full overhaul of the secondary cooling system within the next quarter, Cole said. The thermal cycling is causing microfractures in the heat sinks. Not critical yet, but it will be. File the report. Already drafted. They left. Cole followed them out, closing the door behind him. As he passed Lurel in the corridor, his eyes met hers for less than a second. She saw what lived behind the engineer's mask. A controlled intensity, a banked fire, the kind of focus that did not waver because it could not afford to. That evening, Lurel descended to Sethara's cell for the last scheduled feeding. Tomorrow the cell would be opened for execution preparation, and her access would be revoked. This was the final time she could speak to the Queen before the plan went into motion. Sethara was standing when Lurel arrived, not sitting, not resting, but standing in the center of her cell with her bound hands raised slightly, her stormy skin luminous in the dim light, her vast dark eyes fixed on something Lurel could not see. The Queen was singing, not with her voice, with her resonance, a frequency that hummed below the range of hearing, felt rather than heard, vibrating in the bones of Lurel's chest like a second heartbeat synchronized to a rhythm older than language. Lurel knelt at the slot and slid the tray through. The singing stopped. You are afraid, Sethara said. Yes. Good. Fear means you understand the cost. Only fools and dead things feel nothing before a gamble like this. What if it fails? Sethara knelt on the other side of the bars, bringing her face level with Lurel's. This close, Lurel could see the fine texture of her skin, smooth and cool, faintly iridescent, like the surface of deep water catching light from below. Her dark eyes held depths that seemed to go on forever, and somewhere in those depths, Lurel saw something she recognized. The same fear she felt herself, held steady by the same refusal to let it win. If it fails, I will die as I would have died regardless, standing with my eyes open. But you and Cole will also be at risk. That is the weight I carry tonight, Lurel. Not my own death. Yours. We chose this. You chose this for me. Do you understand how rare that is? Sethara's voice did not break, but it lowered to something that was almost prayer. In my court I was served by thousands. Advisors, warriors, ministers, lords, an entire apparatus of loyalty and obligation. When Draven came, they scattered like dust. Every one of them, ministers who swore oaths on their bloodlines, warriors who carried my crest on their armor. They ran, or they surrendered, or they bargained for positions in the new order. And the person who stayed, the person who chose to risk everything for a queen in chains, is a handmaiden from a species I had never met, and a human combat engineer who wrapped my bleeding hands with a maintenance cloth. The queen's eyes glistened, wet not weeping, composed not broken. The galaxy has a strange sense of dignity, Sethara said. Lurel pressed her fingers through the slot. Sethara's cool, blue-gray hand closed around them. The resonance frequency pulsed between their skin, warm, steady, alive. "Tomorrow," Lurel said. "Tomorrow," Sethara repeated. The third day broke cold and gray, and the fortress was in motion from the first hour. Draven's staff prepared the courtyard with the efficiency of a machine built for spectacle. Ceremonial banners hung from the walls, black and silver, the Sakari occupation colors, deliberately replacing the queen's own ancestral gold and deep blue that had flown from these walls for centuries. The execution platform rose at the courtyard's center, a raised stage of dark stone with restraint bolts and a neural lance mount. The governor's viewing gallery extended along the eastern rampart, furnished with cushioned seats and refreshment stations. Supply shuttles arrived with provisions for the feast that would follow. The garrison dressed in formal blacks. The kitchens prepared a 12-course meal. The whole fortress hummed with the terrible, festive energy of a machine winding toward a single purpose, the public destruction of a woman who had refused to kneel. Lurel moved through it like a ghost. She carried linens and polished silver and laid out the viceroy's ceremonial sash. She arranged flowers in the governor's gallery, ghost-pale blooms from the courtyard trees, Sethara's ancestral trees, cut and placed in Sakari vases. Nobody noticed the cruelty. Nobody noticed the handmaiden who arranged them. At the 9th hour, the first governor arrived, a thin Sakari administrator from the Varen sector, traveling with an entourage of aides. Lurel served refreshments in the arrival hall and listened to their conversation. The governor was bored with the execution itself, but interested in the political signal it would send. "The outer districts have been restless," he told his aide. "This will remind them." At the 11th hour, 2 more governors arrived. The conversations grew louder, more casual. These were bureaucrats attending a performance, not soldiers preparing for battle. They discussed trade routes and tariff adjustments while Lurel poured their drinks. At the 13th hour, Draven himself appeared in the courtyard to inspect the platform. Lurel watched from the upper corridor as the viceroy tested the restraint bolts, checked the neural lance's charge level, and addressed his officers with the satisfied tone of a man who believed every variable was accounted for. He had not visited the maintenance bay. He had not spoken to the handmaiden. He had not questioned why the atmospheric processor was running more efficiently than it had in months, or why the water recyclers had stopped their intermittent failures, or why every system in his fortress was performing at optimal levels. Because a man he considered furniture had spent 8 months ensuring that Catherine Hold worked perfectly, so that no one would have any reason to look closely at the man making it work. At the 14th hour, Lurel took her position. The corridor outside the neural disruption array room was empty. The guards had been pulled to the courtyard staging area where the ceremony was scheduled for the 16th hour. 2 hours. That was the window. Cole had timed it down to the minute. The guard rotation created a gap at the array room door between the 14th and 15th hour, when the outgoing guard left for the staging area, and the incoming guard was delayed by the shift change briefing in the security office. Lurel pressed the portable scanner to the biometric panel. Thesic's retinal data loaded. The lock cycled, clicked, and opened. The neural disruption array was a tower of humming machinery, 6 feet tall, bristling with cables and status lights. It filled the small room with a low, persistent vibration that Lurel could feel in her teeth. She had no idea how it worked. She did not need to. Cole had given her one instruction, repeated 3 times to be certain. Find the primary power coupling, a thick black cable at the base of the array, marked with yellow caution tape, and pull it free. She found the cable. She wrapped both hands around it. She pulled. The connection resisted, then gave. The array died with a descending whine that dropped through frequencies Lurel could feel before she could hear them. Every status light went dark. The humming stopped. And every light in the corridor went out. Lurel counted. 1, 2, 3. She moved in darkness, running through a corridor she had walked 1,000 times, her feet finding the stone from muscle memory, left at the junction. Down the stairwell, 14 steps she knew, because she had counted them on every descent for 8 months. Her hands trailed the wall, feeling the carved Nethari motifs that Sethara's ancestors had cut into the stone centuries ago. The emergency lighting flickered once, a stuttering amber pulse, and did not engage. Cole's work, his patient, precise sabotage of the failover relays, buying her the minutes she needed. She reached Sethara's cell at the count of 38, faster than she had practiced in her head. The electronic lock was dead, a dark panel where a red light should have been. The manual release was a lever set into the wall beside the door, an old Nethari mechanism, part of the original palace design. It had been there for centuries, never removed because no one had thought a handmaiden would ever use it. Lurel pulled the lever. The cell door ground open on ancient hinges, and the sound it made was the oldest sound in the fortress, stone moving against stone, the voice of the palace remembering what it was built for. Sethara stood in the darkness, her shackles dark and open around her wrists. She had already pulled free of them. The energy cuffs had died the instant the array lost power, and the queen had been ready. In the faint light from the grate above, her storm-sea skin seemed to pulse with its own frequency, and her vast dark eyes found Lurel's with the precision of someone who had been waiting in the dark for exactly this moment. "Where?" the queen said. "Service tunnel. Under the courtyard. Cole is waiting." They ran. Sethara moved like water, fluid, silent, her bare feet making no sound on the stone. She was taller than Lurel by nearly a foot, and her stride covered more ground, but she matched Lurel's pace without effort, following the handmaiden through corridors that had been her own palace's halls. Her resonance frequency was different without the shackles, stronger, deeper, a vibration that filled the spaces between the walls like a living current. Behind them, above, the first alarm began to wail. Distant, confused, half-functional, the sensor grid was still dark, the backup generator still cycling through Cole's cascade of delays, and the alarm system was running on emergency battery power that could barely manage a single siren. They reached the service tunnel entrance at the count of 214, 3 minutes and 34 seconds, a maintenance hatch at the end of a dead-end corridor, marked with a faded utility access sign that no one had read in years. Cole had replaced the security seal the previous night with a replica assembled from salvaged components, identical in appearance, zero in function. Lurel pulled the hatch open. Cool outside air rushed in, the mineral scent of the dead ocean and the ghost-pale trees above. Cole was inside the tunnel. He had a hand light clipped to his belt, casting a pale cone of illumination that threw his scarred face into sharp relief. He was kneeling beside an open panel in the tunnel wall, his hands still inside the guts of a relay junction. When he saw Sethara, he pulled his hands free, wiped them on his coveralls, and stood. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The queen and the combat engineer, face to face in a tunnel beneath the palace she had been born in, free and hunted and running out of time. "We have approximately 3 minutes before they reset the generator manually," Cole said. "The tunnel exits at the base of the plateau near the old dock. The skiff is fueled and flight-ready." "How did you fuel a skiff without anyone noticing?" Lurel asked. "I filed a maintenance requisition for atmospheric testing. The forms are in the system. The fuel logs are accurate. No one reads maintenance requisitions. Sithara's mouth curved. You filed paperwork to steal an escape vehicle. I filed accurate paperwork to perform legitimate maintenance on a secondary utility craft. The escape is an unauthorized secondary use. He gestured down the tunnel. Move. They moved. The tunnel was narrow and old, built centuries ago as a service access for the palace's foundation systems. The walls were rough-cut stone, the ceiling low enough that Sithara had to duck. Lurel went first, then Sithara, then Cole. Behind them, the alarms grew louder and more organized. Draven had figured out that his prisoner was gone. Halfway through the tunnel, Sithara stopped. Her head tilted, her long ears sweeping forward, listening to something neither Lurel nor Cole could hear. They are sealing the exterior gates, Sithara said. I can feel the resonance of the locking mechanisms through the stone. The Viceroy is activating full lockdown. The tunnel exit is outside the lockdown perimeter, Cole said. I checked. The old dock was never integrated into the modern security grid because it predates the Sakari occupation by 300 years. You checked. I checked everything. They emerged at the base of the plateau, where the wind hit them like a wall of cold mineral air. The dead ocean stretched below a vast basin of cracked salt and pale dust, silver in the thin daylight, extending to a horizon that seemed impossibly far. The old dock was a crumbling platform of ancient stone jutting over the edge of the plateau, and the maintenance skiff sat on it like a battered afterthought. Scarred hull. Dented engine housing. The kind of craft that had been old before the occupation began. Cole reached the skiff first and pulled open the hatch. Get in, now. A shout from above. The crack of a searchlight sweeping the plateau's edge, catching the dust and throwing long shadows across the dock. A guard on the upper wall had spotted them, 3 figures on the old dock that should have been empty, one of them unmistakably tall and blue-gray in the harsh light. Energy bolts cracked against the stone 20 meters to their left. Lurel threw herself through the skiff's hatch, hit the cargo bay floor, and rolled. Sithara flowed in behind her, not scrambling, not panicking, moving with the deliberate grace of a woman who would not give her captors the satisfaction of seeing her run ungracefully, even while being shot at. Cole dropped into the pilot's seat. The engines coughed, caught, roared. The craft lurched off the pad, dipped sickeningly toward the dead ocean 300 meters below, and then climbed hard, fast, angling away from the plateau as energy bolts streaked past the hull and left burning tracers in the air. Lurel gripped a tie-down strap in the cargo bay, her stomach somewhere in her throat. Sithara stood behind the pilot's seat, one hand on the headrest, perfectly balanced despite the violent, evasive maneuvers. She was watching Cole fly, watching his hands on the controls, the calm precision of his inputs, the way he read the terrain and used it as cover without hesitation. The pursuit craft, Sithara said. Draven keeps 4 interceptors on the upper platform. They will launch within 60 seconds. I know, Cole said. He banked hard left, dropping below the plateau line, using the canyon walls as cover. I also know that I serviced those interceptors last week, all 4 of them. Lurel stared at him. What did you do? I filed accurate maintenance reports indicating that the fuel injector seals on all 4 interceptors were past their rated service life and needed immediate replacement. The reports went to Draven's logistics officer. They were marked received and filed without action. I then filed follow-up reports recommending the interceptors be grounded until the seals were replaced. Those reports were also marked received and filed without action. He pulled the skiff into a steep climb, clearing a ridge of broken rock that scraped the belly of the craft with a sound like tearing metal. The interceptors will launch, Cole said. They will fly for approximately 90 seconds at combat thrust. Then their fuel injectors will fail because the seals are past their service life and have not been replaced, exactly as my reports indicated. Behind them, distantly, Lurel heard the whine of interceptor engines spooling up. The sound grew, 4 distinct signatures, climbing fast, closing the distance with the confidence of pilots who believed their machines were sound. She counted 60 seconds, 70, 80, 90. The whine sputtered, coughed. One engine died, then another, then a third. The fourth managed 104 seconds before its fuel injector seized and the engine flamed out. 4 interceptors, dead in the air, gliding back toward the plateau on emergency power. "Maintenance matters," Cole said. Sithara laughed. It was the first time Lurel had ever heard the Queen laugh, a sound that resonated through the cargo bay like a bell struck at the frequency of joy, rich and full, carrying the Nethari resonance in a burst of unshackled warmth that made the air itself seem to brighten. "Maintenance matters," Sithara repeated, and the laughter in her voice carried something that Lurel recognized as wonder, the wonder of a woman who had spent 2 years in chains, discovering that the galaxy still contained people who were exactly what they appeared to be. They flew for an hour across the dead ocean, the plateau shrinking behind them until it was a smudge on the horizon and then nothing. Cole navigated by star charts he had memorized during his months in the maintenance crawlspace, cross-referencing with terrain features he had studied on geological surveys he had accessed while calibrating the atmospheric sensors. The skiff was slow but steady, built for endurance rather than speed, and Cole nursed it through the thin atmosphere with the care of someone who understood exactly how much the old craft could take. Sithara sat in the co-pilot's seat, her eyes on the stars emerging above the dead ocean's horizon. Without the shackles dampening her resonance, the Queen's frequency filled the small craft, not commanding, not demanding, but present. A warmth that lived in the air, a vibration that said, "I am here, I am alive, I am free." "The Nethari settlements in the outer districts," Sithara said. "The 7,000, the children." "Safe," Cole said. "The resonance bond is intact. You are alive and the frequency is stable. The shatter event will not occur." "You knew about the resonance bond before Lurel told you, before anyone in this fortress told you." "I saw Veros 3. The cabin was quiet except for the engines." "Tell me," Sithara said, "not a command, a request." Cole was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke, and his voice carried the particular flatness of a man recounting something he had locked away and was opening carefully, one seal at a time. "I was a captured engineer on Veros 3, same as here. Different fortress, different warlord, same occupation. They executed Queen Metherin in the central plaza at noon. I was repairing a drainage system 50 meters from the platform. I watched her stand. I watched her refuse to speak. I watched the neural lance activate." He paused. "And then I watched 400 Nethari civilians in the surrounding district collapse. Children screaming in the streets with their hands over their ears, trying to block a frequency that was not sound. Elders going blind as the resonance shattered their optic nerves. A mother holding a 3-year-old who had gone completely still, eyes open, staring at nothing, because the bond that connected him to his queen had just been ripped out of his mind." The skiff hummed through the dark, stars burned above them. "I swore I would not watch it happen again," Cole said. "That is not a reason, it is a decision." Sithara studied him. In the instrument light, her dark eyes held depths that seemed to pull the starlight in and hold it. "You wrapped my hands in the courtyard," she said. 4 months ago, you were beaten for it, cracked ribs, isolation. Why?" "Because your hands were bleeding, and someone had to stop it." "That is a description, not a reason." Cole looked at her. Lurel, watching from the cargo bay, saw something shift in his face, a crack in the composure, a fault line in the steady architecture of control he had built around himself. Not weakness, not collapse, just the truth surfacing through the stone. "Because I looked at you standing there in chains, in a palace your ancestors built, surrounded by a garrison of soldiers who saw you as furniture the same way they saw me, and I recognized something." What? That you were not broken. That they had done everything they could to break you and you were still standing with your back straight and your eyes open. And I thought, that is the most dignified thing I have ever seen anyone do, and I could not walk past it. Not again. Not this time. The dead ocean fell away behind them. Ahead, the Badlands rose from the salt flats' rough terrain, unpatrolled, canyons and ridges where resistance cells could hide. Sethara reached across the space between the seats and placed her hand on Cole's forearm. The gesture was deliberate, unhurried, precise. In Nethari culture, Laurel knew, it was the Queen's acknowledgement, not a romantic gesture. Not only that, it was an equal recognizing an equal, a sovereign saying, "You are not beneath me. You are beside me." Cole did not flinch. He did not pull away. He placed his free hand over hers, briefly rough, calloused fingers closing over cool blue-gray skin, and then returned it to the controls. The resonance frequency shifted. Laurel felt it in her chest, a deepening, a warmth, the way the air changes before something irreversible. Not a bond formed, not a vow spoken, just two people recognizing each other clearly in a galaxy that had spent considerable effort making sure they never would. They reached the Badlands at the third hour past midnight. Cole set the skiff down in a narrow canyon between walls of red stone that blocked searchlight sweeps and sensor scans. The landing was smooth. The combat engineer knew how to put a craft down in hostile terrain without leaving thermal signatures. The resistance contact was waiting. A Nethari woman in field armor, taller than Laurel but shorter than Sethara, her blue-gray skin darker in the starlight, her expression hardening, and then breaking when she saw the Queen step out of the battered maintenance craft. The woman dropped to one knee, not because she was ordered to, because she chose to. "Your Grace," she said, her voice cracked on the second word. "Stand up, Commander Vetha," Sethara said. "We have work to do and very little time. Draven's response will be immediate. The outer settlements need to be warned. The resonance network needs to be reestablished. I have been dampened for 2 years, and the bonds are frayed. And I need to know the strength of every cell between here and the capital." Vetha stood. Her eyes were wet, but her spine was steel. "We have been waiting, Your Grace. 14 cells, 2,000 fighters. We never stopped." "I know you did not. I felt you even through the dampeners, faint but there." Sethara turned to Laurel and Cole. The Queen was taller than both of them, and in the starlight, with her storm-sea skin and her ancient dark eyes and her swept-back ears, she looked like something from the oldest stories the Nethari told their children, the queens who could not be caged, whose resonance outlasted empires. But her voice, when she spoke, was not mythic. It was quiet and tender, and carried the weight of seed bread eaten through a slot, and every morning Laurel had knelt at her cell and not been invisible. "You are not my subjects," Sethara said. "You owe me nothing. I was a prisoner and you were prisoners, and what you did was not duty. It was not obligation. It was something I do not have a word for in my language, and I am not sure the Sakari have one either. But I think the human word is closest." She looked at Cole. "What do humans call it when someone sees a cage and decides the cage is wrong?" Cole thought about it. "Decency," he said. Sethara nodded slowly, tasting the word. "Decency, yes, I will remember that." "Your Grace," Laurel said, because the words had been building in her for months, because she needed to say them before the moment passed. "In the cell, every morning, you asked about him. You asked how is the human, every single day before anything else, before you asked about the war or the resistance or your own fate." Sethara did not look away from Cole. "Yes." "Why?" "Because he was the first person in 2 years who treated me as though I had a name. He did not kneel. He did not serve. He did not petition or bargain or calculate advantage. He saw me bleeding and he stopped the bleeding. He wrapped my hands with a cloth he carried on his belt for cleaning machine parts, and he did it as though my hands were worth the same care he gave to a pressure valve. There is no protocol for that. no title, no rank, only a man with a cloth and the quiet decision that my pain mattered. Cole stood very still. The desert wind moved through the canyon, carrying dust and the faint mineral scent of the dead ocean they had crossed. His scarred jaw was set, his gray-green eyes steady, but Lurel could see the tension in his shoulders, the effort of holding something back, something that wanted to crack the careful architecture of composure he had built to survive. "Your hands do matter," he said quietly. "Your grace." The title was not deference. It was recognition. He said it the way he said maintenance matters, as a statement of fact, verified and documented and beyond dispute. Sethara closed the distance between them, not touching, not reaching, just standing close enough that the resonance frequency between them became something Lurel could feel, like warmth from a fire, not consuming, not dramatic but steady, present, real. The Queen's vast dark eyes held Cole's gaze, and what passed between them was not a word and not a gesture and not a vow. It was the recognition itself, raw and simple and unhidden. The forbidden thing, not forbidden by law or protocol, but by the architecture of power that depended on certain people remaining invisible to each other. "You saw me, I see you." Lurel watched and understood that this was the moment the fortress had been built to prevent. Not the escapes could be recovered from, prisoners recaptured, walls rebuilt, but this seeing, this recognition. Once it happened, it could not be undone. You could not make someone unseen again. You could not put recognition back in a cage. Dawn was coming. The sky above the canyon walls shifted from black to deep violet, and the first light caught the edges of the red stone and made them glow like embers. Behind them, somewhere beyond the dead ocean, Draven was marshaling his forces and sending furious communications to the sector governors, explaining that his prize prisoner had escaped with the help of a handmaiden and a maintenance worker, 2 pieces of furniture that had walked out the door, and taken his entire political spectacle with them. Ahead, the Nethari resistance was stirring. Lurel could feel it now, the resonance network reawakening as Sethara's unshackled frequency spread through the Badlands, reaching the scattered cells, touching the faded bonds of 7,000 civilians who had been waiting in silence for 2 years. A signal that could not be jammed and could not be silenced, because it did not travel through wires or waves. It traveled through the living connection between a queen and her people. Cole turned toward the skiff. "I should run diagnostics on the engine. If the patrols expand their search radius, we may need to move quickly." Sethara watched him go. Then she looked at Lurel, and for the first time the Queen's composure cracked, not grief, not fear, but something that lived on the other side of both. Wonder, maybe, or gratitude so large it did not fit inside the careful container of a queen's bearing. "He is going to fix the engine," Sethara said. "The fortress is burning behind us. The occupation is mobilizing. My people are rising from 2 years of silence, and the human is going to fix the engine." "That is what he does," Lurel said. "He fixes things." Sethara laughed again, quieter this time. A sound that carried recognition and wonder and something that might have been the beginning of love, or might have been the discovery that love and decency were closer kin than the galaxy usually admitted. She turned toward the resistance camp, where fighters were emerging from concealed positions in the canyon walls, drawn by the resonance of their freed queen. Lurel saw their faces hardened, scarred, carrying the particular light of people who had waited too long for something they had never stopped believing in. Lurel followed. She was still a handmaiden. She was still invisible by training, but she had read an execution order and chosen to act. She had carried a scanner in her apron and a death sentence in her pocket, and walked through a fortress full of armed soldiers without being seen, not because she was nothing, but because she had made her invisibility into a weapon. She was not furniture, she was not background. She was Lurel, and she had chosen this. Behind her, The sound of Cole's wrench rang against the skiff's engine housing, steady, rhythmic, certain. The sound of a man who had wrapped a queen's bleeding hands with a maintenance cloth and changed the course of an occupation with accurately filed paperwork and a loose relay contact. The dawn came full, flooding the canyon with light that turned the red stone to gold and caught the pale dust in the air like drifting embers. Sethara stood in it, her storm-sea skin luminous, her dark eyes open, her resonance spreading across the Badlands like a tide returning to a shore that had been dry for too long. Laurel stood beside her, a handmaiden who had learned that invisibility was a choice, not a sentence. And somewhere behind them both, a human fixed an engine because that was what he did, and because some things, some people were worth the maintenance. The cage was open, the queen was standing, and the dawn at last belonged to no one but the people who had earned it.